welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, but not just any fantasy today, because last Sunday, a very exciting episode of House of the Dragon came out, and we have to talk about it, isn't that right?
Yes, we are reacting to episodes 3 and 4, probably mostly 4 here, to House of the Dragon. I mean, that's... who knows what will have happened by now, because we're releasing this on a Monday, and another episode will have come out, but...
this is the risk we run.
We have to... it's the risk we run.
Thank goodness we didn't drop this episode, like our last episode after this episode 4 came out. We would have looked like dang fools talking about not this crazy stuff that happened, that I guess we should owe it to do a spoiler warning first, but it's like we would look like dang fools.
We would have looked like dang fools, Charles, or at least sounded like dang fools, because we usually don't have a lot of video content over here. But I will say we were lucky episode 3 didn't exactly blow the doors off, as excuse the turn of phrase, because it's episode 4 that everyone's talking about now, and for good reason. I mean, like you said, spoiler warning, turn this down your headphones if you haven't watched the first 4 episodes of season 2 of House of the Dragon. All right, that's out of the way. Charles, we lamented in our episode 1 and 2 discussion that this is a show with a gigantic budget, with dragons, with a war going on, and we still had not seen any dragon-on-dragon warfare. We'd seen a little dragon-on-dragon violence, but we had not seen dragon-on-dragon warfare all out, and we were like, come on. Like, the stage is set. Please give us what we've been waiting for, with some big battles and dragons fighting dragons. And Charles, the most recent episode, the currently highest rated episode on IMDb of any House of the Dragon episode yet, that is season 2, episode 4. We finally got what we've been begging for. And Charles, I loved it. How about you?
It's been a long time since, like, I've been watching Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon where I was on the edge of my seat. Like, I have very fond memories of watching Game of Thrones for the first time during some of the pivotal, exciting moments and being like, oh my god, is this happening? Like, what's going to happen next? Like, totally just excited and surprised. I was feeling that for this battle scene at the end of episode 4. For the first time in a long time, I was like, oh my gosh, like anything could happen. Like what I'm watching is insane. And these dragon battles are freaking awesome and exciting. And they had like a battle plan that wasn't just, oh, I'm going to sneak into I'm going to have one person sneak into your castle. And you're going to have one person sneak into my castle. And I'm going to have one person sneak into your castle. It's like, good God, it's been 3 hours. And all we've done is sneak into each other's castles. Now we finally have dragon on dragon fight scenes, and it's we had the prince that was promised, Dylan. This was the dragon battle that was promised, and I'm so glad we got to watch it in this last episode.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you also mentioned the fact that we were finally getting like legitimate battle strategies depicted, which is something that's been sorely missed since Game of Thrones. I mean, we've only really had the war going on at the start of the second season, and like you said, it's mostly been adapting Lindsay Lohan movie plots in turning those into
they did like the Parent Trap, the reverse Parent Trap. It's just so silly.
I mean, the twin switching, no one will notice, that happened with Eric and Eric was taken right out of the Parent Trap. We know that. And then we had, we're gonna sneak Rhaenyra into the castle and blah blah blah.
Don't
It's like,
forget
ugh,
Daemon going and sneaking into the castle with blood and cheese. It's just like,
I mean, vintage
what
Herbie fully loaded right there.
vintage.
Freaky Friday.
Freaky Friday.
All the way.
All the way. It's well said, Dylan. Was I remember texting you after episode 3 being like, dude, I'm getting annoyed because we're having the same 4 conversations over and over again all season in what feels like the same 4 locations over and over again. It was driving me crazy. Like the amount of times they showed Corlys talking to, I don't know the guy's name, but he's like, oh, you saved my life. They're literally talking on the same dock and he's standing in the same place having the same conversation. Like, they even did it in episode 4, but it wasn't Corlys that time. It was Rhaenys, where it's literally the same conversation. It's like, I heard you saved my husband's life. It's like, we know. We've said
I've
it
been
about
watching the last
6 times. By the way, I don't care about this person, like, at all. So let's move it along. I don't care about this setting at all. Like, the dock of a ship. You're not even going to show me any ships. Like, so I was just getting annoyed. And then, like, the same set piece of the castle in King's Landing and the same, like, war room in Dragonstone? Dragonstone, thank you. I keep using it with the one
That's
Skyrim.
the Skyrim place, yeah.
Dragonstone. And they're all having the same conversation. It's basically just like, oh, we should fight. No, fighting is too aggressive. There's still a chance for peace. Well, you killed their son. I would have never killed their son. Well, it's your fault anyway. It happened no matter what, and they're going to think it was you. Like, that happened on both sides multiple times for hours and hours and hours of television. And I'm just like, can we please? Like, these actors are incredible. The show looks amazing. It has the budget. Like, let's start seeing some stuff. Why are we delaying? And I was getting a little over it. And I think they waited 1 episode too long. But now they got me back. I'm pulled back in. I'm here.
Yeah, as you should be, Charles. And I think it's reinvigorated the fan base, much like it's reinvigorated you. And I would say I've had the same feeling. I did like episode 3 a bit more than you seem to like it, but I get the feeling of being, and I think maybe I had a little bit more of a reaction to it feeling slow in episodes 1 and 2 than you did. Mm-hmm. So we were a little all over the place, but the general consensus was first 3 episodes a little slow. And then episode 4, yeah, they must have just been saving up that budget. I mean, they couldn't even afford to clothe poor Aemon Targaryen in episode 3 because they were sending all of that budget over to this giant CGI dragon fight that looked amazing over another battle. I love this idea of, just to follow up of the strategy, Kristen Cole, who we haven't really known for his competence. He is the one who watched The Parent Trap and was like, I think we can use this to kill Rhaenyra. And then when that didn't work, he was like, all right, I'm done with the Lohan movies. I'm going to come up with this plot where we're hiding our big dragon and we're just going to kind of lure them in, and even at this little location. And then suddenly I was like watching the lord of that small keep. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I'm sure we can find it. But the small keep.
Oh, Rooks something, right? Rooks.
Yeah, that does sound right. Look it up while I'm talking, Charles. But
I don't even know what to Google to look this up. Rooks Reach or whatever? Something
like that. And I'll say, watching that guy,
Rook's Rest. I was so close.
Rook's Rest. You think everything's Reach, if we're being honest, Charles.
Because something is
this
a Reach.
Time you were close. Yeah.
And it's not just these screenwriters, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, nice. That's good, Charles. But
thank you.
it's watching that guy as he looks on, and his tiny keep has somehow become the set piece for a freaking dragon on dragon on
Absolute
dragon.
madness. Yeah.
Yeah, just and the idea that these whatever tactics, whatever's going on the battlefield, all of it is just moot because they're just gonna settle it in the air with the dragons, and it's just a really perspective shifting experience for the people who are trying to fight that battle. And I do like Kristen Cole's plan, but it completely, I don't know if backfire is the right word, but there's a monkey wrench completely thrown into it when, of course, Aegon Targaryen comes in. He's just fed up that he's, and drunk, that he's finally had the kid gloves taken off when he like talks to his mom, and she's like, "You're incompetent, and we
Just
don't need
do
you
us all
to
a
do
favor
anything.
and don't
Just
do anything."
yeah. And then he does the opposite of that. He hops on dragon and flies over there, and we just get this absolute chaos.
In that legendary armor, by the
And
way. R.I.P.
yeah, true. That's fair. And then chaos ensues, including probably the most interesting, from a plot perspective, thing that happens in the episode is Aemon's decision to just shoot some fire, Dracarys mode, have his giant dragon just shoot fire right at not just Rhaenys on her dragon, but also his brother, Aegon the King. And we don't know everything about his intentions yet, but I mean, it is exciting. And how could you not think he saw an opportunity to take the throne himself? And after his embarrassment, embarrassment in the brothel that took place in the previous episode, he was not really feeling great about Aegon or Aegon's rule, and that's what he decided to do, Charles. So what do you think? What do you think of that moment? And then maybe we can talk more about just the spectacle of the dragon fight.
When you say that moment, you're talking about the brothel scene? You're talking
no, well, we'll get there too, Charles. Don't you worry. We will get back to episode 3.
I'm just kidding. I know
scene.
exactly which moment you're talking about, and what I liked about it, because it was for so long now, there's been this promise of like dragons fighting, right? That was like the whole premise of the show. It's like, oh, Game of Thrones, but we'll actually have dragons doing stuff the whole time. I mean, it's an episode where it's a show where there's just dragons everywhere. And so you're like, okay, I'm in, sold. But they've been very slow about it. And we've heard a bunch of times, it's like, trust me, dragons fighting dragons is not a good thing. You want to avoid it at all cost. And while I still think they went a little long with that, this moment does a fantastic job of showcasing what they're talking about and the true horror of unleashing dragons and how dragons just totally changed the game of battle strategy. And it kind of what makes the like warfare elements of this show interesting and different, because there's still like, oh, we're gonna lay siege to these people, win over these banners, but at the same time it's like the strategic placement of dragons becomes the key to winning this war, where it's like, oh, like they'll want to use a dragon for the first time thinking we're not going to dare use ours, but we'll have ours in waiting. Oh, but then we got a secret dragon coming in, so this one's going to come later. And like the strategy behind that is really interesting and unique, and I appreciate that. And they were actually able to back it up with this absolute chaos and destruction where it didn't matter you couldn't even tell what side anyone was. Well, they were all on one side, so I guess you could tell, but it's just like the dragons were just killing indiscriminately because they were just fighting, and these people were in the way. They're breathing fire, like army dudes are just caught in the middle, and they're being like burned to skeletons within their own armor. The absolute chaos of it all is so well shown in these scenes, and some of these dragons are just absolutely massive. It was really, they did a fantastic job setting the stakes of this is what it means to have dragon on dragon warfare, and just how destructive it can really be, not just within the character relationships, but in the physical destruction of it, which I thought they did a really good job of.
That's well said, Charles. Yeah, the whole thing, like I said, was a spectacle. I mean, the it's really interesting. One of the things they have done really well is use the like the size differences of the dragons to
Yeah.
make a point. Like you'll start with even Rhaenys's dragon looks huge, right?
Right.
And then you get this moment where Aemon's dragon is emerging from the like underground or whatever it was doing.
Mhm.
And then you see that and you're like, oh my God, that is next level. And we know his is the biggest dragon. And
Mhm.
then you see how it dwarfs even Rhaenys's dragon, who's the biggest dragon on the other side. And
Right.
it's just a like
And Rhaenys' dragon is the most
wacky.
experienced, the most scrappy, led by the most experienced, scrappy, and they have the longest bond. All this stuff doesn't weigh up against Aemon and his just giant dragon. It just didn't matter at all.
Yeah, it did not, and it's a it's an interesting moment following. Okay, well let's start with we're getting some back and forth between Rhaenys's dragon and Aegon's dragon as well when Aegon comes in, and we get that that moment I was referring to where Aemond is possibly taking the opportunity to try take the crown for himself. And the biggest thing that happened in this episode was the unknown fate of Aegon Targaryen thanks to Aemon's betrayal. So, Charles, what did you make of that from a plot perspective?
Yeah, I mean, they had that weird moment where Aemon had the sword like three-quarters of the way drawn, and Kristen Cole witnessed it, and then Aemon like resheathed it. It's just like is an interesting scene where it's like what was happening? Was he like drawing his sword to kill him? Like I don't. You're led to assume so. He clearly lit him up on during the dragon fighting. Like clearly, just like Dracarys direct hit, which you could argue he like what's his face Aegon was getting ripped to shreds anyway. So this was a chance, like while Rhaenys was distracted, to hit her with Dragonfire, and it was just he was there too. But it was obviously a deliberate attack. So it's one of those things where it's like Aemond is the real strategic mind, the real threat. You see the connection between him and like Daemon had that weird vision where he looked like Aemon, and so you're like, okay, there's like clearly some sort of power struggle tie to them, and Aegon is just like a lot of this episode was dedicated to him being like, no one takes you seriously. When you act up, you're just getting in the way. Like you need to just be kind of subdued. And so that, because they didn't show a body, you can't help but think, okay, he's obviously going to survive. There's probably going to be some sort of regent, like, ruling on his behalf kind of thing where, I haven't read the books. I don't know, but I'd be surprised if he was, like, dead, since they didn't show it in the episode. But in typical Game of Thrones fashion, unless there's a body, I'm not buying it. So
yeah, I mean, well, we see his likely not entirely dead body on the ground, kind of like nestled into where the dragon is and all that kind of stuff. My sense is he's likely in critical condition would be what I expected.
He's
and that
definitely
was like,
messed up now, for sure.
Yeah. so we don't know the extent of it, but consequentially uh, injured, and possibly, it could be coma, it could be, he can't even speak anymore, he can't, whatever, we don't know, right? He just got burned up and fell from a huge height. As you're saying, I mean, I watched the after the episode, as I do, even though it makes me angry, and I there's a little of them trying to be like, oh, we don't know what Aemon could have been like intending when he did that. Like, was he? And it's like, what could he possibly have been intending but to launch fire at his brother, who is the king, in front of him in the line of succession? It's like not a. It seemed pretty cut and dry to me that he seized that opportunity. Like, anyone who is like a loyal king's man is going to be like, okay, well, the thing that would make the most sense to do to kill the other dragon right now would be breathe fire. But that's my king. I guess I have to do something like slightly not strategic to try to save him. And he just didn't do any of that, and instead breathe fire that I feel like hurt Aegon way more than it hurt Rhaenys. And it just real. And then what else could he possibly have been about to do with his sword at the end of the episode, other than put the nice way of framing it for him could be, oh, I was gonna put him and or his dragon out of their misery. That's all I meant to do. But it's like, that's also regicide to kill your regicide, and was it fratricide or something, killing your brother and your king.
Kinslaying and kingslaying, both.
Oh, king and kin, nice.
King and kin, yeah.
Fratricide, regicide, kinslaying, kingslaying. I mean, all sorts of things that you're not supposed to do.
Kingslaying is bad too.
I would say kingslaying is generally considered worse than kinslaying in Westeros.
Jaime Lannister.
Yeah, he
never lived that one down.
Just never lived that one down. But I'll say it was captivating in a way that House of the Dragon hasn't really been for me since like that episode where Viserys is on his last legs and he's what'd you say, Charles?
I will sit the throne today.
Yes, that bit, like, that was an amazing episode, and from just an acting chops and actually really great dialogue and suspense, all that kind of stuff, like, that was a work of art. But this episode was just a spectacle, just fireworks, just something that only a giant CGI budget and a desire to entertain can possibly create. And I don't think we've seen anything like this.
No,
we've just never really seen.
I was kind of catching some YouTube footage of. Can we like subtly spoil Game of Thrones? I guess so, right? I don't know.
I mean, well, you've been warned if you're one of the people who's not watched Game of Thrones but is watching House of the Dragon, which I feel like is not a lot of people, and are also listening to a fantasy podcast. That's like a weird intersection of people, but just you have been warned now.
You have been warned,
that Game of Thrones spoilers are coming.
I was watching YouTube, and I was watching Jon Snow and Daenerys flying their dragons in the long night, and it's like that scene is like pitch black. You can't see crap. The dragons aren't even fighting each other. It's not even on the same stratosphere as the insane effects that we saw in this episode. Not even close. And we're talking about late Game of Thrones. It just was like a ballooning production budget, and this topped that big time. So it was just really interesting to see a show that for so long has been like a character drama, like a court drama kind of thing with limited sets, like characters talking at the same pier, having the same conversation. And now we've got this absolutely insane dragon battle with like armies of people and a castle and all these other things. And you're like, whoa, this looks, sounds, feels incredible. So I hope they can keep it up. I know that they probably like are strategically placing this moment so they can't have every episode be crazy dragon battles, but I do hope that as this conflict has now escalated and war has just flat out been declared, that we can have more, if not dragon battles, at least more battles and action and strategy, politics going forward, stuff that really kind of fueled the entertainment value of Game of Thrones for so long.
That's well said, Charles. I think that more of that is on the way, but as you're saying, they probably spaced things out very intentionally. And they're like, okay, episode 4 was incredible. Everyone loved it. That
we'll in the finale.
Hopefully tied them over. Yeah, hopefully that'll tie them over until, who knows, episode 7 or 8 or how many are in this season, Charles? Have you looked that up? Is it
no idea? It's
like
usually 10, but maybe it's 8 to 10 is usually the.
Yeah, let's
see. House of the Dragon season 2 episode count.
8. Yes.
Oh wow! So we're halfway through.
We are halfway through, and
that's kind of sad.
It is, but I'd rather 8 episodes where they really sought to make it them like. Yes. I'll say, based on how slow some of those first few episodes were, I don't know if what happens in this season needed to be stretched over 10 episodes. But I'm really enjoying it now. I'm really excited about what the future holds. And these kind of things that make you really feel like you care about what's happening, even if a lot of it is just like, oh, that dragon is trying to bite that other dragon's head off. This is wild. Then, I don't know, suddenly I come away from this being like, wow, I feel like I care more about the characters and the choices they're making. And it's like they didn't change the characters drastically. No one did anything completely out of character, but I think just the excitement that you see yourself feeling from these moments makes you be like, I guess I care a lot about this show and the characters.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Right. I mean,
I care now.
Yeah. So that had that kind of reaction. It instilled that in me because I was thinking, I said this a few times. I don't know if I said this on the pod on the last time we recorded about House of the Dragon, but I was feeling like you could set this number at like 10 or maybe even 20. There was a while where I was like, now that Viserys is gone, I think that there are probably 10 to 20 characters from the original Game of Thrones that I was more invested in and cared more about than any single character in this current show. Right. And like, even if you just say, okay, let's just take it at like the point we're at now, halfway through season 2. Like, I think I was pretty much there. Like, we're getting to the point where you're comparing like Daemon Targaryen to maybe Braun or something. Like, that's literally
You're
how I was kind
like
of feeling.
Larys Strong to Littlefinger, and you're like, not even close.
No, not even close. And I still feel that about that. But these choices that they're making to get you excited about what's going on and then have these moments like what Aemon just did, I'm suddenly like, okay, now after he just did that, I'm super invested in Aemon Targaryen at the very least, and I'm captivated when he's on screen. And you have these stakes that are building, and now real things like potentially a king dying that are happening that suddenly you're like, okay, now the stakes are high. I feel like I care more about the characters. And it feeds into itself like that. And we're such character-focused folks that... it's and good when you can get us caring about the characters.
Competing against each other in this game of war now, where it's like, I would be really interested to see how these characters continue to fight this war across all these different bannermen and like all these different castles and land, and now you have different dragons with different strengths and weaknesses, and Like I want to see where this goes, you know?
Yeah. Me too. And I think we're gonna, I don't know if it'll be the next episode or the one after that, but I think those last couple episodes are probably gonna be pretty intense as well. So looking forward to those. Just
Agreed.
other things from this fourth episode that we might want to discuss, or should we move toward the third episode? Because that episode obviously not met with the same level of fanfare as episode 4, but there's certainly some moments that are worth talking about when it comes to that one.
There are certainly a lot of moments I like to nitpick about the third episode. The third episode was not a banger for me. One of the things I was laughing at was when Rhaena was flying her dragon and sees Sir Kristen Cole, and they like just get into the trees, and she like pulls up and she's like, "Oh shoot, they got away." I was like, "What?
You
Are
know
you kidding
trees
me?"
are made of wood if you want to
fly
burn
right
them.
through it. I've seen these dragons like bulldoze through castles or just light it all on fire.
Yeah.
And even they did mention that in the War Room in episode 4. It's like, you should have breathed fire. And I was like, yeah, you should have. And she's like, well, next time when you ride on your dragon. And it's like, that's not a good response to that. You messed up big time. You could have ended that battle before it even started. If you just with a little Dracarys, you know? You think Aemond would have let him get away? I don't think so.
No, but to be fair,
fire.
To be fair, she would be acting completely against what her queen wanted her to do. She was not supposed to burn them all to death. Like, that was that she was still in the mode of, oh, let's not use dragons, they're nukes. Like, there's a lot of that, I feel like, going on. And you know what? Like, yeah, don't use nukes as well. Like, nukes are messed up, but there's a TV show, and we want to see the dragons. So
it's just funny that they acted like, oh, the trees, the dragon's worst enemy.
Right, yes. It's like some weird Pokemon type advantage that doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, everyone knows that grass defeats dragon. That's as a self-proclaimed Pokemon master, Charles, I assume you know that
grass
is not a
does
true
not
type
defeat
advantage.
dragon.
No.
I do know that,
No.
yes.
Fairy
they are
does.
neutral damage and defense against each other.
But what about fairy, Charles?
Oh, fairy is super effective against dragon.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason that fairy was created, was to kind of bring some balance against the dragon type.
Well said.
So,
yeah.
if you
well,
must
that
know.
is. Yeah, I must know. But something else that we must know, Charles, is your opinion on that brothel scene. You did mention it. There were a couple moments in there that were shocking. The one of which is going to be tough to talk about on our Queen podcast.
I will start with this,
what is
right?
Yes.
We forget how Game of Thrones was built, right? Game of Thrones was built on the back of being essentially pornography. We can't forget that. Like, I know later seasons, they classed it up, and like, characters that used to do nude scenes don't do them anymore, and hey, I'm all for that. It was in a very transitional period in Hollywood and cable television and all that stuff, so no problems there. It's just weird now to see House of the Dragon, which still has shocking moments of gore and violence and sometimes sexuality and sex stuff, but it's just different, and it's just like it's a little weirder. Like, it's not like pornographic. It's just like bizarre. I don't know. It's so just like the full frontal scenes, the brothel scenes. Like, they're very like, they're not like exploitative. Like, maybe you could say like Game of Thrones was. It's not like sex position going on. The sex position is Aemon crying and the hostess's lap. You know, like it's not the same.
Just
not like bathing together.
So to clarify, that term "sex position" is a portmanteau of portmanteau, I think is the word, which is a combination of two words to make one, like brunch. So it is a portmanteau of sex and exposition. So
Mhm.
it is not sex space position, which is something totally different. Sex position is this idea of that Game of Thrones would basically just, when they're trying to tell you about like, oh, the history of the Targaryens, and
Something
it was
boring like
like,
Targaryen
yeah,
history.
right, which is now the entire show that we're watching, but whatever. Like there's that moment I always think of with, I think he was named Viserys as well, right? The character that was Daenerys's
Yes.
sister was named
Hmm.
Viserys as
Hmm.
well. And
Hmm.
he's like in the bath or something with this female character that ended up being like sort of Daenerys's friend and then betrayed her. But she's just like totally nude, and him being like, oh yes, and then there were the like dragons, but they kept getting smaller and smaller and blah blah blah, and the camera's just like very focused on like look, naked woman, like we are trying to keep your attention, and it's HBO. And that was like some of the early season Game of Thrones stuff. To call it pornography is a bit derisive
It's
for
a
my
bit
taste, but there's definitely
hyperbolic.
some, yes, there's definitely a lot of like exploitative feeling stuff, and that sex position of like, oh, these people aren't going to want to listen to boring fantasy history, like let's show them a nude woman, and then they'll be entertained. And
Mhm.
we've moved away from that, and it's for the
Yes.
best. But
Hmm.
yes, we've moved toward this like, I'll say for the full frontal, that was a
Yeah.
character moment, right?
Hmm.
That is him being like, I'm not the kid that gets bullied anymore. I'm just going to walk out of here, and I don't care what anyone thinks,
Yeah.
even if I'm
And there's
naked.
like these
And
human parts of himself that he's closing off
yes,
and killing off, as well as like last vestiges of human connection with other people, is like his
because
emotional relationships with other people are pretty much all gone.
yeah, because you could say, as far as we know, the last one he had was with the prostitute that was his, like he lost his virginity to, and he
Mhm.
still lies with her, like meaning literally lies down with her, and like basically spooning, and he tells her really sentimental, personal
Mhm.
stuff, and
Mhm.
then when he's getting bullied, he gets up and he says something to the effect of like, one whore is good as another, or whatever,
Yeah.
like go ahead and lay with her. And he doesn't mean literally lay with her, he means figurative laying.
Mhm.
And I'll say that does kind of cut him off from his, because we don't see anyone else yet, like his relationship with Alicent seems non-existent. Like there's
You're
just
right.
no scenes depicting that. And then
Mhm.
like everyone else at court is incapable of human connection. So who else is there? And it's this character moment. So I do the full frontal. It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's
Mhm.
like something that, talking heads like us, Charles, are gonna end up discussing. So I think we're always like, House of the Dragon is always looking for those moments, and even just like the first ever episode was like that gruesome pregnancy
Yeah.
scene, or like a birthing scene, and it's just they have these shocking moments of, oh, everyone's gonna be talking about this. So it was all of that kind of wrapped into
It's like,
one.
oh,
I
it's
don't
Game of
begrudge
Thrones.
them
We do
that.
need to show some kind of shocking, mature content. It can't always
Yeah,
be like torture, violence. We need to show some like sexual stuff too, but we don't want to like sexualize any one gender or orientation or anything like
right.
that, which is great, but it just creates these like calculated scenes that are like, are they even necessary anymore, was what I thought.
But
And it was just like shot really weird, and like I got all the metaphors behind it, but it's like the slow standing up, like the subtle camera movements, like the slow turning, not even the fact that he was naked, which I'm like, hey, go for it, man. you know like keep that eye patch off, flaunt it, you know? It's cool looking. I'm talking about the eye. The eye on his head.
Yes.
And the blue glowy one with the jewel or whatever it is.
We got you, Charles.
Yeah, yes, to be clear. And, you know, it is what it is. But it just, like, what it does show, it's like, is how much, as much as these characters claim to care about family and claims to the lineage and this and that and the honor of their house and all these things, they've just failed at actually being like parents and like significant others, and the absolute failure. Like Viserys probably didn't even realize Aegon and Aemond and Helena even existed, let alone bother being a parent to them. Like Otto Hightower just sees them as chess pieces so he can stay in power. Like, these kids have never felt love. They're so broken and confused and frustrated and, like, absolutely broken as human beings in a time where people have gotten, like, super summer children, if you will, for the sake of the show that we're watching, where it's just like no one's experienced any hardship or any war, and they're just playing at warfare until it gets very real in these final moments. So I get that they're doing some of that, and I think they needed a low budget way to shock us. You know, it's much cheaper to have a naked person on the screen than it is to...
They don't even have to pay for the clothes. No costume budget there.
Costume budget is very good in that scene for sure. And that character, Aemond, is one of the more interesting ones by far, even more now after this episode. But he always just kind of like stole the scenes that he was in. His performance was always super like dramatic and mustache twirly, but I've always liked it.
Yeah, to speak to that, I read somewhere that the actor had never watched Game of Thrones, and then when he was cast, he was like, okay, now I'm also gonna deliberately continue to not watch Game of Thrones. And he's like, I don't want to be trying to act to whatever I think this show is. I just want to take the character and be what I think he should be and how I should play him. And it has made him this kind of standout, like almost, I saw some tweet that I think went kind of viral that was like, this guy, I can't say all of it on our Clean podcast, but it's like, this guy with the eye patch is the most anime-looking MFer like in any live-action show ever. Like, he just is willing to like play this role that sticks out for being so like different from what we've seen before in Game of Thrones. And there is a bit of this, like, I'm just a mustache twirly villain, but I don't care. Like, I'm not, like, there's no,
mustache
it's like unabashed, like, and it does make him stand out. And I think, you know, for me, it's kind of been between him and Daemon for the character I feel most captivated by. And Daemon was winning out, but now we've got Aemon doing things that are making him stand out far more. And I feel probably most interested in him. We'll get to Daemon in a second, but
I think what I like about Aemon the most is that of all these characters who are like, oh, we can't go to war. Oh, no, don't do that. That would be bad. It just like everyone kind of delaying everything. He is a man of action, and he's got the competency to back him up. So there's almost something like therapeutic about a character who's like, I'm just going to go claim the biggest, baddest dragon, and then I'm going to go and do this, and then I'm just going to go ahead and plan this sneak attack and take out these dragons, and I'm going to intercept this dragon. And like, yes, he's still a child, and his inexperience is what caused him to kill poor Lucerys by accident, and he's admitted to that being a mistake that he regretted. But it's like someone doing something, like making progress in this conflict, even though he's killing his cousin. It's like someone is making progress here, and a sea of inadequate people with Kristen Cole and Aegon and even Alicent to some extent and Rhaenyra. It's just like all these characters. You're like, are these characters going to do anything? Like, here's Aemond, who's at least, if he's a little bit unhinged and chaotic, he's very
just a wee bit,
proactive.
Charles. Not completely. Yeah, he is completely and utterly unhinged, and I think it's. But that competence is part of what is interesting about him too. And Charles, it harkens back to something we've discussed a few times on the show, which is Brandon Sanderson's. He has those 3 sliders of like, how do you write a compelling character? And the 3 ones are things that we have been talking about just incidentally discussing this guy. And it's like, how do you interest people in a character? Well, you've got you've got competence, you've got proactivity, like proactiveness, and you've got likability. And he's like, you can turn the sliders down on any of those, that's fine, but then you have to compensate by turning it, making sure it's up on the other ones. And he's got feelings of almost like a Jorg or Jorg, however we're saying it, from Mark Lawrence's Prince of Thorns, where it's like, we're all okay with just turning his likability as a person all the way down, but we've got the competence way up and we've got the proactiveness way up, and that makes this person compelling. Plus, on top of it, we've got an amazing actor out there playing him who's just willing to go all in for this role. I mean, if the full frontal wasn't proof enough of that, this guy is throwing all of himself into this role. And then we get these, like, one of the best scenes of this season. I feel like something subtle besides the giant dragon battles is just like where they're at the small council, and we have Aegon being like, you're plotting behind my back, I'm the king, blah, blah, blah. And then we have Aemond speak High Valyrian to him in this, like, he's just speaking it fluently because he's a Targaryen, and almost all Targaryens learn this and speak it fluently. However, the spoiled older brother who's sitting the throne, like, probably barely comprehends what was said, and then responds with something like, I have to go make war now? Like, something like that. And you just get this everyone in a small council, like, they probably don't speak High Valyrian, but they have the basic common sense to say, that person's clearly fluent in this language. And that person can barely speak this language.
They don't even need to know what they're saying to know that Aemond is talking circles around Aegon at all times. That was a great scene, and thank God they didn't over-explain that moment.
Exactly.
Finally, a little bit of a deft hand to make that scene happen. And I've seen a lot of praise for that scene. In an episode where you have dragons fighting each other, people are actually calling that out and saying it was hilarious and it was great and such a good character moment where it's like this season at least desperately needed some of that. And so that was a great scene. I'm glad you touched on it, because I feel the same way. It's another example of Aemon's proactiveness, but also his capability. Literally embarrassing Aegon in front of everybody, like just spotlighting Aegon's own incompetence, and that's part of what fueled Aegon to fly into battle and get himself in the predicament that we find him in at the end of the episode. So great character work done for the Greens in this one, for sure.
Yeah, and it felt like vintage Game of Thrones, those scenes that we love, right?
Yes.
Where someone's like, I'm not doing anything wrong here, technically, by the, like, very clear feudal system, and, I am not doing anything to the king that is wrong. I'm just speaking to him in High Valyrian, and that's fine, but then he puts Aegon in a position where he makes him look like a fool in front of the whole council. And we've had moments kind of like that where characters kind of find a way, even though they're not in the position to make someone higher than them look like an idiot or whatever. but they still managed to do it, and in a clever way. And I think we finally got a moment like that, and a moment that, like you said, was not over explained. Like, it feels like in previous episodes you would have had someone, like, after the meeting they'd all get up and leave, and then one of the random council members would say to the other council member, like, hey, did you see that? I'm starting to get the sense that Aemond, who speaks their ancient language of High Valyrian extremely well, is highly competent due to, like, that's what that represented to me. But then it seemed like the king, Aegon Targaryen, did not speak High Valyrian well, and it makes me question if he might not be highly competent.
Like, cut to the after the episode. So Aegon in this scene couldn't really speak High Valyrian as well because he's been slacking off on his lessons, and Aemon put him in this position where he couldn't really communicate, and that made him look even more embarrassed in front of the High Council. And you're just like, I know, I just watched it.
Here's the thing, Charles. Yeah, I get it, and I have, like I said, similar reactions, but the reason that moment with we've talked about a few times with the green dress and like, the reason that moment being the one where Alicent walks in the green dress, and then Loras leans over.
Banners
like,
when high towers go to war.
Yeah, it's green. And then after the episode, they said, "Oh, like, I don't know how many people are going to pick this up, but actually green is the..." And so that one really bothered me because A, it was stated explicitly in the episode, and then B, it was stated again in the after the episode, and then C, they had the nerve to be like, I don't know if anyone will pick up on this because we think that our viewers are dumb. And this one, like, what are they supposed to talk about in the after the episode? It's a lot.
I don't know how they made three dragons fight each other. Like, that's kind of an
okay, but Charles, here's the thing: they do have a thing called the house that dragons built. Yes. That is entirely.
I'm going to watch a whole nother thing. I will.
I mean, I don't know. I wanted to watch it. Like, I assume they are corresponding to particular episodes, meaning like episode 4 of the House of Dragons Built is hopefully dedicated to explaining the episode 4 of House of the Dragon. That one I would watch, but I'll say, we have this finally this respect for the viewer in the moment of the High Valyrian discussion. And then, look, if after the episode they're going to just say, this is what happened in the episode, that's fine. Just don't then just say, I don't know if anyone will pick up on that. And don't repeat things that were explicitly stated in the show already. That's my line for getting angry at the after the episode. But I'll say, Charles, one thing that we didn't really discuss, which is shocking as we near the tail end here of our House of the Dragon episode, we haven't really discussed Daemon, and that's fair, I think, because what has he been doing the last couple episodes? He's been, like, stomping around Harrenhal, having, like, trippy visions. Thoughts on all that? Thoughts on where it's going? Like, how's it have you feeling?
Meh. Yeah. It's like, well, we can't have 4 dragons fighting in a scene. That's going to be way too expensive. So have him have, low CGI hallucinations for half the season. I mean, it's fine. It kind of invites some of the more interesting, like, greater Game of Thrones lore about and around Wizardwood, and it brings in some of that more supernatural stuff that Game of Thrones kind squandered a little bit. It's nice to see them.
Wizardwood? Yeah, Werewood trees?
What's Wizardwood?
Wizardwood is in the book we're currently reading by Robin Hobb. Yeah.
It's in the Live Ship Traders.
I just like, it's
much
so
going
close. On. I don't begrudge you this one.
Thank you.
It's
but
tough,
no one
man.
You're playing idea what we're talking about. Werewood trees.
Werewood trees. There was but I was like, yes, and then I was like, wait, like,
no, right? No,
you're
totally right.
Book we're reading. That's close though.
It's very close.
That's tough.
Read the
That's
Lives
like
of
Dragon's
Treasure
Ridge
trilogy.
and Dragonstone. Yeah,
Yeah,
dude,
yeah. Give
those
me a
books
break.
are so good.
So anyway, with Daemon, it's kind of fun to see him like lording over this court where there's like 3 people in it, and the room's falling apart, and you've got the grandson who's trying to speak for a incapacitated old man. It's kind of funny to see Daemon like try and play at being in charge when Rhaenyra really is. And it's kind of fun to see this greater magic spooky stuff. But at the end of the day, when his scenes come on, it's another scene of him walking around the castle like, oh, I hear things in the castle. And it's like,
For the listeners at home, Charles is for some reason doing a perfect way that Daemon holds his sword by his forehead. I didn't quite put it in my by his ear kind of. I was like, I just saw that and I was like, whoa, that's exactly what it looks like.
It's just funny. I'm like, what is he doing? He's like going around the corner. Like, why is he in like stealth mode? Like, wouldn't you just hold the sword the way you would hold it, like out in front of you like this, like like swinging around? I don't know. It was fine. I mean,
you did fence in high school, Charles, so I trust your word on all of this.
Thank you. Yes, and I did fence in high school, and it's it was whatever. It was fine. It's kind of funny where he's like in a castle that was built over a chopped down weirwood forest, and he's sleeping in a bed made of weirwood. It's like, that's like going into building your castle on an Indian burial ground and then sleeping on a bed of like dug up Native American bones. You know what I'm saying? It's absolutely insane. It's hilarious that he's doing this, and you wonder why, to what effect is he doing this. And we'll see. He's trying to win over some bannermen or something of some small houses. I'm sure he'll come back, but his vision of him with Aemon was kind of interesting, so I'm sure that all these things are going to make more sense 4 episodes from now or even seasons from now. But it's kind of nice to see them respecting like the greater lore of Game of Thrones. And I feel like these showrunners are very cognizant of the fact that people felt like the greater lore and magic was kind of poo-pooed in Game of Thrones a little bit. And they kind of want to pull some of that back in. And so I think we'll see more and more of that as it goes. And I'm okay with that. I'm down.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see where Daemon's gonna end up fitting into all of this, because he's sort of claiming things for Rhaenyra, but then the way he's acting is like really wanting to elevate himself. So I'm just curious the extent to which he's just very clearly on Rhaenyra's side and the extent to which he tries to elevate himself in some way, and all of that remains to be seen. But Charles, I think we've pretty much said what we can about what we have seen so far. I will say that we were not necessarily planning to come in with this episode 3 and 4 reaction. We weren't like, we'll do every 2 episodes. But when we saw episode 4, we just wanted to discuss it ourselves between each other. And then it's like, well, let's throw the recording devices on.
Let's turn it into content, baby.
Yes, like the Harkonnens once said, Charles. Content. Squeeze.
Absolutely.
We made some content here. We squeezed these 2 episodes for everything that we could, and I'm excited. Maybe we will be back with 5 and 6, or depending on how it goes. I expect we'll at least be back with probably a full series discussion by the end of it. But
yeah, for sure, there's gonna be more to talk about with this season as it's ongoing. It probably won't be episode 5, so I'm sure we'll take a break from it for a while. But we gotta come back and see what's going on. There's so much that has been set that we're eager to watch. Does Aegon know who killed him or tried to kill him, as they
Does
say.
Aegon know who killed him?
Is there going to be another Parent Trap Freaky Friday situation?
Yes, which
How are they
Lindsay
going to
Lohan
handle
movie?
this Mean Girls mentality
Yeah.
in court? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, and we'll have to just get a clue as to what's going to happen next.
Well done, Charles.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I don't remember a lot of Lindsay Lohan movies, if I'm being
I had
honest.
to Google it.
I kind of... Oh, okay. Good job. Yeah, that makes more sense. I was like, I pretty much, what do they say, like unloaded the holster or something. I used everything I had on... I mean, I did know Mean Girls, of course, but for some reason it didn't come to mind. But yeah, Herbie Fully Loaded, Parent Trap.
She was just in one this year after a hiatus. The
Really?
Irish Wish, yeah, a Irish-themed rom-com on Netflix. I did not see it.
Can I just say, this is totally not relevant at all, but which is a great thing to do an hour into an episode.
This is where the
irrelevant
meat of the episode really
crap
comes out.
into it. Yeah, is so I have a friend who owns a little like a tea shop, and you know them, Charles, but I'm just not trying to say people's names that aren't affiliated with the podcast, but and she actually had Lindsay Lohan's dad come into. Did I tell you this?
I don't think so.
Come into the cafe, and he was there with, I think, like a son or daughter from a new relationship, not with Lindsay Lohan's mom, and there was like a relatively young child, and the like apparently the guy was like, hey, like, do you know who my daughter is? Like, he explicitly was just like,
that's funny.
With no non sequitur, being like, I'm Lindsay Lohan's dad. Like
5 guesses like, to who my daughter is. I'll give you a hint.
I'll give you a hint.
Friday.
It's Lindsay yeah. I'll give you a hint. You ever seen Mean Girls? It's Lindsay Lohan.
She played 2 characters in The Parent Trap.
Yeah,
the 1998 version.
But unlike the parents in The Parent Trap, I never reconciled with the person I divorced with. And apparently when he was just like being like, hey, I'm Lindsay Lohan's dad, just thought everyone should know that. Then the kid apparently was like mortified. Like, you could tell that they just, everywhere they go, this is what he does. So that's my tidbit on Lindsay Lohan's dad.
And imagine living in the shadows of Lindsay Lohan. It's like, if Lindsay Lohan is Rhaenyra, that's like this kid being like Aegon or something, Helena maybe. Or even Daemon,
I would say,
don't even see.
Exactly. I would say probably not to attack. I'm sure that this kid is listening to FDF and is an hour plus into the episode, so I don't want to hurt his feelings or her feelings. I really don't know the gender or their feelings, Charles, but I'll say they probably are closer to, like Jaehaera Targaryen or whatever, like some character we are not. Oh, what about Aegon the Younger Targaryen?
Oh, well, I was trying to go with like Viserys's kids, right? A much older kid in Rhaenyra, and then a much younger kid from a different relationship with like Aegon, or you could say Daemon Targaryen, because I wanted it to be like, my sister is Rhaenyra, but like we have no relationship because we're a generation apart. That's what I was going for. But you're on with the disconnection of the relation. It may as well be random. But
no, I think you nailed it, Charles. They're probably Daemon Targaryen, who is like, we're looking at this House of the Dragon on the website, this like family tree, and some people have pictures and some don't. And Daeron is just a
I
sibling
forgot he
of-
existed.
yeah, just a sibling of, like, full-on sibling of Aegon, Helena, Aemond, and then there's just Daeron, who is not
He
pictured.
gets the chill. Yeah.
Yeah.
He gets the kind of say
That's
of the
probably
comic. It still says Rhaenys is not. They didn't update the deceased thing for this season.
They might want to give it a little bit. But
I can
but
see
I feel
why
like,
they wouldn't do that.
But yeah, I guess, because also Aegon's son is not listed as deceased.
Yeah.
Eric and Arik, they are not listed as deceased, so I guess it hasn't really been updated at all this season, probably.
They're trying to keep it spoiler free. When you're when you're trying to watch the first episode and you're like, oh wait, what's this lady's name again? Rhaenys Targaryen? Oh, deceased? That's a bit of a shocker. I could see how that could ruin someone's day. It was just trying to figure out the name of this freaky character.
It is. I mean, we're
when
getting
you have
used to it at
Rhaenys,
this point,
Rhea,
Charles. But yeah, it is
Rhaenyra, like 2 Viseryses, 2 Aegons, technically 3 Aegons. You know, it gets a little. You have Rhaena, Rhaenys,
Rhaenys, Rhaenyra, and also
Larys.
We're dealing. I mean, even Aemond and Daemon, who have some similarities as characters, have the same exact name, except one has the D at the front and one has the D at the end. And Charles, do not make a joke about the brothel scene when I'm saying that. Do
never turn the phrase D at the end to turn it into some sort of wordplay about Aemon Targaryen's full frontal scene at the brothel. I would never do that. I could, but I'm not going to because
it's
I'm
in your
classy.
power. Yeah, it's very classy, Charles. And
Thank you.
Know what else is classy? That sweet, sweet outro music.
Oh, well said. I think it's about time we wrap this up for the sake of our poor listeners. So what do you say we get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping?
Let's get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping, Charles.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, one and all, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. Now, Dylan, if the fans at home like what they heard today,
You've been struggling with this lately,
and they want to support the show, one of the best ways to do that is by following us and engaging with us over on the socials. That's at the FTF podcast on X and TikTok. No, not X. It's Instagram and TikTok, and then at the FTF podcast with the number 1 at the end on Twitter. I don't know, man. I'm not over there, but I like to pop in every once in a while. Dylan does a great job, and it supports the show to go over there and engage with us over there. You don't want to miss anything that happens. And Dylan, if they like what they heard today and they want to support the show even more than comments and engaging with us over on the socials, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast, which you can do over on Spotify, where most of you are listening. Just gotta click About for some reason, and then click where the stars are. Throw us 5 of them. You can also rate and review on Apple Podcasts. That means you can say nice things about us. You can say, hey, Charles, I don't care that you flubbed the ending of this episode, even though you've done it, 200... How many, Charles? Like 250?
We're rapidly approaching to... Well, let's see. We are... Let's see. How far are we? I'm pulling up the episodes. We are at... Shoot. Everyone hold. We're doing this.
Hold
the door.
We're at 2-7. Rate the podcast. Rate the podcast. Rate podcast.
We are at 274. So don't miss out on episode 274. You'd think after enough times that we would nail this, but we'll get there. And your support will help
You
us.
like how I
5 stars.
how I turned into a podcast, much
Yeah.
like Hodor.
Yes,
All
man,
he
we
says
are
is,
laying in
yeah.
heavy on the Game of Thrones spoilers today. Laying in heavy.
I mean, we warned them, and also, I don't know, the hold the door thing. You wouldn't know until finally, once it was happening. You'd be like, okay, whoa, okay, this is what they were talking about, but it doesn't spoil in and of itself. But anyway, yes, you can write all of that, everything we just said, in a review, as long as you give us 5 stars. We don't care if you ramble, we ramble all the time. But just listening is more than enough, especially when we ramble this much. So we appreciate you so much for making it this far.
Well said, Dylan. Just listening, putting up with us every day, every week, or whatever, however long we list stuff, podcasts.
Every day.
You could listen every day for 274 days. We're coming up on an episode a day for a year, man. We're
right,
almost
but
there.
then you just start back at the top, you know?
Yeah, just do it. Listen over and over. Please to go ahead and do that and rate us 5 stars and follow us on socials. But forget all that, man. Thank you all for listening. You guys are awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're out of outro music. And
we made it to the end.
I
don't think we've ever made it to the end before. This
is just a disaster. We need to get out of here. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.